thousands of people listened.
Thousands?
Thousands.
Thousands of people downloaded it.
They listened.
All right.
Okay, hundreds of people listened.
God bless them.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Watchmen, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series Watchmen. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, the King Bee.
Let's get ready to ramble!
And this is our Newsstand episode where we look back on this week's edition of Watchmen and provide the top listener emails and voicemail for the week. This week's episode was titled, If You Don't Like My Story, Write Your Own. King Bee, what'd you think of it?
I found it to be quite a pleasant viewing experience. No, it was a great little opener. I love the sort of O. Henry style fable we get right up front. The way it's shot, she drops the eggs and the husband catches the one and they give each other the look. It was just shot really beautifully. It's a Hallmark postcard in video form.
I agree. It was fantastic. And we got some great feedback from the audience on what some people dubbed a filler episode. Roger Roper and I disagreed. I believe you disagreed as well, King B. And without further ado, let's get started. Again, if you want to write into the Newsstand, it is our listener mail edition of Shat on TV Watchmen, where we read your emails. These emails will not necessarily be read in their entirety. Some of them are truncated for length, so we can get as many people in as possible. And all of them will be available on the website, shatontv.com, under the Watchmen Newsstand section. Our first email for the day comes up from listener Frank, who's writing about the Millennium Clock. He says, while listening to your episode 4 deep dive, at the very end, Roger mentioned how the wonder of the new world can only be destroyed by a nuclear blast or something similar. It triggered an aha moment. As you two mentioned, Lady Trieu reveres Ozymandias and his works, so she created a device that will put the USA, or world, in such a cataclysmic event only Dr. Manhattan can stop it, thus forcing him to return to Earth. As Ozymandias sent Dr. Manhattan away, she knows only an equally destructive scenario can get his attention to bring him back to Earth. If Trieu wants to get revenge on Dr. Manhattan for his involvement in the Vietnam War, or some other motive, I have no idea. Oh, and Lady Trieu's daughter is obviously her clone, and her nightmares are from Lady Trieu's own past haunting her. What do you guys think? Keep up the good work, and yay, more blue penises. Frank.
Well, I'm going to take issue with the clone thing and the nightmares. It is very much a comic book trope that clones seem to have the memories of the source material. That wouldn't happen. Nightmares and memories, those are all environmental factors that impact a thing. And if it's grown in a jar, it doesn't share those imprints. So they're not going to exist.
Now, there is a concept called genetic memory, which is the belief that a species or a lineage can have something so extremely affect their environment that it actually gets coded into their DNA. Why certain animals are afraid of certain things and they don't know why. Now, on one hand, you could say that those who survived a thing were those who were afraid of that thing, and therefore it's not that an event caused a code change in the DNA to make somebody afraid of things. It's just that those members of the species who were afraid of that thing survived it better. But there are some theories of genetics that believe that there is such a thing as a genetic memory. Lindelof in the official Watchmen podcast did correct his co-host when Phillips and Crookshanks were referred to as clones. He said they weren't, and I wonder if the show is trying to introduce something different from a clone. It's not exactly a clone, but maybe almost a reproduction of a person that also carries some sort of memories along with it, or maybe a distilled memory of a people. We don't quite know yet. But getting to the idea of the Millennium Clock being a Dr. Manhattan trap, I don't know if it is, but it does seem like bait for something. There is a very cryptic thing that Lady Trieu says, and that she says it tells time. Like that's what it does. And it's like, okay, we can't simply do that. You wouldn't build something that big just as a clock.
Who can say? But I can't wait to find out.
Thanks, Frank, for writing in. Next up, we have one from Zach. This might be my favorite letter to the Newsstand this week. Zach writes, "Hey all, I don't really have justification or a lot of evidence for this, but I think that Adrian Veidt might be in a prison of his own design. I think that the actual location of his new castle or fortress isn't necessarily the big part of the mystery. I personally think that Adrian needed a new test for Ozymandias. I think that he created this new place to live and is trying to challenge himself both mentally and physically. The mental challenge being that this spot should be a paradise. Adrian has servants and a luxurious house, as well as tree tomatoes galore. He has a horse as well as land to hunt on. I think that he designed this to challenge and affirm that he really wants to escape. Physically, I think that he's challenging himself to get out of a trap that he himself designed. I believe that if we actually see the face of the game warden, it may just be another Mr. Phillips clone. I think that in a sense, Veidt is playing himself in a game of chess, and that is the cause of his frustration. The only person Adrian has struggled to outmaneuver is a player of his caliber. I'm working on the book, so I don't have all the details so far, but that's my take at the moment. Love the show. Keep it up. Zach."
I'm going to throw another theory back at you there, Zach. Imagine that Adrian Veidt is jealous of and wants to recreate Dr. Manhattan's powers for himself. What if the game warden is actually the original Ozymandias or Adrian Veidt, and he's sort of training a duplicate of himself to make this break? You know, he once claimed to be a descendant of Alexander the Great. He has likened himself to all these great conquerors and he is one of the many greatest minds that the world has ever known, but maybe he does need to subject himself to a sort of baptism by fire. Maybe he's not willing to risk his own skin to do it, but if he were to create a duplication of himself, I don't think that his vanity is so great that he wouldn't allow a spiritual sort of duplicate to make the journey in his stead. I love this idea. It's fantastic. It's almost biblical in its scale. I really hope we're right.
And Zach, kudos to you for really pointing out that I don't think it's the where Ozymandias is. I don't think it's supposed to be the big mystery here, but like what is going on in his psychology. I would hate if I were Lindelof or anybody else on the team of writers and everyone's treating this like it's some NBC show where it's like, where is he? Where are they keeping him? And really the question is, what's going on with him? What's happening in his psyche? What's happened to this man who stood at the pinnacle of triumph 30 years ago? And what's going on with him since he had that victory? So great observation, Zach. We have another letter that speaks to Ozymandias in his prison, and that comes from Chris. He says, "Hey guys, great podcast. It's my first in the Shat network, and I'm enjoying it." Well, welcome, Chris. Just wanted to point out that there is a blank gray globe in the Da Vinci scene. So he's referring to when Ozymandias or Adrian Veidt is working in his workshop. Perhaps this is a hint that Ozymandias is in fact off-world or in another dimension. And that comes from Chris.
What if it's a model of a carbon atom? It could be anything. It's just a globe. It doesn't have to be a thing. But yeah, this is another great indication that what's really important isn't so much the where, but the what.
Yeah, and you would think that if he was, say, on Mars, he might have a globe that had features of Martian terrain. Or if he was on the moon, lunar terrain. Or if he was on Earth, it would just be the Earth. HBO recently in its series is noted for attention to detail. So I wouldn't be surprised, especially in a show that is acclaimed for its Easter egg drops, if there weren't clues spread throughout this workshop about where he is and what's going on. Thanks, Chris, for your letter. Next up, we have a more lighthearted one that comes from Frank. He says, "Hi, guys. I think Agent Petey is the lube guy, and that's how Agent Blake knows more than it seems she's taking in. He's always hidden in the background quietly, and this is the first time he was noticed." Frank.
I think you're the lube guy, dude.
I mean, his physical dimensions, I guess, kind of match up, but it would seem very odd to me. We've already seen Petey's mask. He likes the little Lone Ranger mask, whatever. Again, I'm not saying he's not Petey. He runs really fucking fast. But I think Laurie Blake is smart enough on her own, considering her pedigree and her past, that she could figure these things out. She is also a federal agent with the expansive capabilities of government surveillance at our fingertips as well. It doesn't seem that this would be that hard of a mystery to put together. And in fact, people aren't very good at hiding things in the show, so I'd probably be able to figure this shit out. If PD is the lube guy, I don't know. It seems like Laurie Blake might notice when he was gone, and if there's anything he could do to really piss her off, it'd be dressing up like a vigilante.
And it seems like they had to pack pretty light for their trip. Where's he keeping that big old belt full of lube?
I mean, you can get those anywhere.
Maybe you know where to get them everywhere.
Our next email comes from longtime listener Gillian, who writes in, "We know from the PDpedia files," and she references file 1 entitled Clipping, Veidt declared dead, that Adrian Veidt went missing in 2012. If that was the first year of his captivity, episode 1 would then be the first anniversary of his forced retirement, meaning 2013. Episode 2, where he's putting on the play about Dr. Manhattan, would be 2014. By episode 3, we see him experimenting with a suit, perhaps a makeshift spacesuit, putting us in 2015. In episode 4, he successfully launches a clone out of the atmosphere. We see it gets enough height to go way above the clouds without dropping, from what we could tell, which would put us at 2016. We see a ball of fire drop out of the sky at the start of episode 4, wherein Lady Trieu hastily buys a couple's house and a 40-acre farm and trades them their biologically yet laboratory-created son for it. Then suddenly a ball of fire falls from the sky with Lady Trieu saying, "And that is mine." We know the events of now are 2019. So if episode 4 gave us Adrian Veidt's 2016, episode 5 would be 2017, episode 6 would be 2018, and episode 9 would put us in today. So instead of a Westworld 2 stories, 2 timelines, which is which, this is just giving us 9 years worth of Veidt's captivity in one fell swoop of a season. Wherein I first thought the big surprise would be seeing Dr. Manhattan at the end of the season, I'm starting to wonder if all we'll get is Veidt's escape from prison and teaming up with Lady Trieu and our dear friend Will Reeves. While this has no real impact on the story that we're seeing, maybe we can shy away from the tinfoil what time period is Veidt in and really just say that every episode is another year in captivity wherein he is trying to escape. And they will have shown us 9 years worth of his captivity and how he got out in a nice, concise 9 episodes. Your annoying friend, Gillian.
Yeah, it is a disjointed way to tell the story. I believe that you are accurate in saying that each episode is showing whatever's going on in that year, but then they are going back to a distinct narrative that takes place not over 9 years, but rather a few days. At what point are the results from one going to show up in the other? And I'm thankful that it's not going to be some sort of weird Westworld style puzzler. But who can say? I'm, again, just eager to see and find out.
An interesting nugget that I got from the official Watchmen podcast was the shooting schedule. Lindelof said that they needed to shoot all of Jeremy Irons' Ozymandias, Adrian Veidt scenes in Wales before the weather got bad. So they made that a priority and shot that first. What that tells us is that his story is critical to the rest of the tale. Like a lot of what we saw in the graphic novel was you'd have these side stories that don't directly impact. They might be allegories, but they don't directly impact what's happening in the overall narrative. In this case, he has to link up with the rest of these characters at some point or impact this world in some way. So having a 9-episode timeline in his 9 years of disappearance would make sense. Also, Roger Roper pointed out that when Adrian does the Dr. Manhattan origin story play, The Watchmaker's Son, that also the watch is stopped, indicating a 9-minute interval for 9 episodes. So could be something there. But I love the way that you map this out, and I think that'll really help give some clarity to viewers at home who are wondering what the hell is going on with these interludes.
Miss you, Gillian.
All right, getting back to the object falling from the sky, we have listener Lianka who wrote in, "My coworker and I thought of something. The meteor that fell from the sky was actually Superman. Lady Trieu bought the land from the Clark family and gave them a baby so they would not find Superman and raise him as their own. He is now her property. Thoughts? Lianka."
I think I'm reporting you to your boss for time theft. Well, here's the thing. all these characters are analogs for characters that already existed before. And they're trying to tell you a story, a sort of fable. This is just another unique take on the analog for the story that we all know. That obviously this kind couple, which could have changed the face of humanity, has been subverted. And now maybe the natural order of things has been diverted into the hands of this wealthy industrialist.
Also, a little tidbit for you and your coworker, Leonka. The family that raised Superman was the Kents. His name is Clark Kent. So if you were thinking this was the exact family that found Superman, no, different last name. So anyway, but yes, but speaking of what the King Bee said, there is the idea there. A what if is being explored. I just don't know if it's necessarily the what if that you're thinking of. Thank you so much for writing in. A little bit more ambiguously now, we have one from Jose. He says, "Hey guys, love all your podcasts with the exception of Taboo and American Gods." Burn. Quick question. Is it possible that the object falling on the Clark's farm at the beginning of the episode is Ozymandias after his escape? Also, I do not believe he is on Mars. How could he seriously expect to travel from Mars to Earth by being thrown from a catapult? It does not make sense.
Yeah, well, you know what, Jose? We didn't love him either. Thanks for listening anyway.
I floated this idea by Roger Roper, and he pointed out quite astutely that the timeline wouldn't make sense because it seems that the Lady Trieu meeting with the Clark scene would have happened before the development of like downtown Tulsa as it is today with all of the different spark hydrants and everything else going on. So in that case, I don't think they developed it all in a matter of like 2 years. So for Ozymandias to land in 2016 and then that land be built over in a matter of years would be a little weird. What's he been doing the rest of the time? It also doesn't really match what Gillian was pointing out is that idea of the 9 years in captivity. Could it be a power source? Maybe. Could it be a character we haven't seen yet? Probably. But it is, as the King Bee said, one of those things that don't see it as something to confound you, but rather something to be excited about. We're going to eventually probably see what that thing was, and it might be a nice big reveal that's going to please everyone. Thanks, Jose, for your email. Next up, we have one from Amanda. Amanda is writing in about Cal Abar, Angela's husband. She says, one of these things has to be true. 1, Black Manta, which is the character he plays in Aquaman, is too damn hot to sit on the sidelines. He's going to come to play a bigger role than the waffle-making atheist dad. I think he's some sort of a vigilante, maybe back in Vietnam with a brief mention of the accident. Or, to go super batshit on this theory, what if he is Dr. Manhattan? Or at least has some connection to him? Clearly, he makes Laurie a little tingly in her lady parts, so there's that connection. But also just the clear-cut, heaven isn't real, Uncle Judd died and is nowhere, who wants waffles, is very Manhattan-y. Alternatively, this could just be HBO being feminist as fuck. What if we hired a super talented actor, gave him a shit ton of sex appeal, but then gave him no real purpose other than to be a doting partner for the main character? It's like every movie ever with a male lead, but reversed. I am totally okay with this, but I demand nudity. Only seems fair, Amanda.
The blue dong just ain't doing it for Amanda.
Well, I mean, the thing here with Cal is, I completely agree with you, Amanda. Listener Coach Marcus and others on Twitter had pointed out that there might be a connection with Dr. Manhattan because he seems special. I think the reason he's special is because he's a good-looking man who supports his wife, raises children, explains things succinctly, fucks like a beast in the closet, and also doesn't start shit with people on the porch. He's a unicorn in his own right because he's completely different from any other man I've met. I would love the idea that HBO is just being feminist as fuck, because until you pointed this out, Amanda, and I'm glad you did, I didn't really realize it. You see this all the fucking time in Avengers movies or any other comic book shit where it's like there's a guy, for some unknown reason, he's got this beautiful wife who's super supportive, raises the kids, she's super hot, they have great sex, and nobody wonders, is there something special about her? It's just expected.
Alexander Skarsgård in True Blood. He was nothing but meat for that show. In fact, the entirety of True Blood is just soft porno for undersexed housefrows.
You watched True Blood?
I watched every fucking episode of it.
All right, next up we have a voicemail. Again, if you want to call in for a voicemail, dial 914-719-SHAT. This voicemail comes from Tom W. in North Carolina.
guys. This is Tom W. from North Carolina. I think I've called in on almost every podcast except for American Gods, which I never got into. But that being said, I'm calling in about Watchmen. I think that there's a part of this that I think they're trying to link with. I don't know if y'all pulled up the PD files and looked at that stuff, but I think that the ultimate twist is that, or one of the big twists is that the marshal is not dead. I think that this was all set up by him. His funeral was set up to kill people. Apparently, he has a twin brother. If you watch the PD or read the PD files, I think this was all done and set up purposely to go after the cops. Now, I don't know reasoning. I don't know what's going on. I think Kane is somehow involved, the Kane is somehow involved. But I find it very interesting, all of this works together. I think that, going back to the novel and looking at all of that stuff, I think that, there's some stuff going on in the background that we're supposed to think this, and he was just an evil person. Well, I think there's more to that. I don't think he's dead. I think he comes back. I think Judd is alive. I think that this funeral was pre-planned and part of this attack. And I think that I don't know how Will Reeves is involved in this, and I think maybe he's actually going to be a cog to flip it on its head. I think he may not have originally supposed to have been there. I think he just saw what was going on and got there too late. Anyway, that's what I had to say, and hope you guys post it. But if not, enjoy the show, and I really do enjoy you guys. Thanks again.
Well, thanks for calling in, Tom. It's good to hear your voice again, and thanks for joining us for so many podcasts. Man, no love for American Gods and all the hard work we did there, King B.
I will say it's probably some of our best podcast work. It's where I really got to shine and hone my skills, but it was a dog shit show. I don't blame anyone for not liking it. I just wish they would have listened to us so I wasn't talking into outer space.
Now, thousands of people listened.
Thousands?
Thousands
of people downloaded it.
They listened.
All right.
Okay, hundreds of people listened.
God bless them.
Tom, several people have kind of guessed that Judd Crawford might not be dead. One of the big clues that we saw was the missing shoe thing, tying that back to Mueller, who was the strongman who was shot dead when they thought that they were killing Hooded Justice, and it seemed to be a case of mistaken identity or a planted body. There could be that parallel. And King B and I have talked before on this podcast on the Newsstand about the idea that in a world where you have clones or genetic reproductions, it's quite possible that someone might not be dead. You also have beings that are essentially deities like Dr. Manhattan who feasibly could, reconstitute someone out of thin air.
I really don't want it to be a twin. I'm probably doing this podcast a disservice, but I have not made any effort to explore PDpedia. I wanted to view the show on its own merits and see if, can this thing stand without hordes of supplementary material out there. I came to watch a TV show, maybe see some titties, maybe see some blue dong. I didn't, tune in to read a book. So that being said, I hope it's not a twin. That just seems a little hokey. I want him to be dead because if it's all just some sort of plot, there seems to be so many moving parts that could just go wrong at any moment. It defies logic to a degree that I just can't accept.
And Tom, I went and looked at the PDpedia file that you referenced. It seems in that clipping about Crawford's death that what they're saying is his father had a twin brother. So not Judd himself, but his dad had a twin brother. And I don't know if there's any connection there as far as something. It's conspicuously listed in the article, so I mean there might be something going on there, but it's not Judd's brother. So I don't think there's any way they did like a body swap or anything like that.
Who can say?
Thanks, Tom, for calling in. Well, with that voicemail and those emails, that wraps up this edition of the Newsstand. Thanks, everyone who wrote and called in. Again, if you'd like to write in your ideas about Watchmen, just write us at host@shatontv.com or call us at 914-719-SHAT. That concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV Watchmen Newsstand. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcasts. The website is shatontv.com. Wherever where fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please write a review. That helps the podcast grow. And thank you to everyone who has. Your words of encouragement do mean a lot to us. We all have a feed on Slack where we get to see all of them, and it gives us encouragement on the days where we have to slog through and make this fit our schedules and stay up all night editing. So on behalf of my co-hosts, the King Bee and Roger Roper, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for coverage of Watchmen Episode 5, Little Fear of Lightning.